the very few plays in which I was not even to take on the role of the title character, Don Juan, but rather that of his moralizing servant, whose name, once again, just happens to be Sganarelle. This was only to further the arguments of the pious, who insisted that my portrayal of the sanctimonious Sganarelle was limp, ineffectual, and disingenuous, while Don Juan himself remained the more appealing character, who in spite of the looming cloud of perdition, which seemed to follow him wherever he went, always seemed to have his own way with the most attractive women. As we take Sganarelle has been approached by the serving man of one of Don Juan's many wives, who has come to find out the reason for Don Juan's sudden disappearance. I don't pretend to know my master's heart, nor am I authorized to speak his part. He sent me on ahead to scout the way, and I get to speak to him today. But let me whisper softly in your ear. Forgive me if I say this too sincere, but may I be confounded and forsworn? Don Juan is quite the greatest villain born! The man's a dog, a devil, and a beast, a heretic at the most very least. He doesn't feel for heaven or for hell. His heart is nothing but an empty shell. He doesn't care how conscience grapples us. The man's a wanton Sardanapalus. Instead of thoughts of heaven which secure us, the man lives like the swine of Epicurus. No cry, complaint, nor sliver of remonstrance can cause the slightest quiver to his conscience. You say he wed your mistress. Fancy that. He would have wed your wife, your dog, your cat. And if he thought it might so serve his health, he'd fetch the preacher and wed you yourself. It costs him nothing to contract a marriage. He cares not how you might decry, disparage. He'll wed each woman, bourgeois, lady, peasant. No female, fit or fat, he won't find pleasant, as long as he might tickle on their drum. He'll marry them however they might come. I see that you now gape and sigh and blush, and yet I paint him with my lightest brush. Were I to give a much more apt depiction, it would demand a much more vulgar diction. I'll only say, the wrath of our dear Lord will one day claim this soul so far ignored, and will dispatch it to a lower level to wed him to his one true love, the devil. Such horrors I see from this ne'er-do-well, I might well wish him sent straight. I can't tell. Of all the evils, no, by far the worst is when great lords with wickedness are cursed. Oh! Sir, it's not you I mean to criticize. Oh, God forbid, you know what you are doing. And only heaven knows what you have brewing. But while you stand as single visionary, there are yet libertines who aren't so wary, impertinent free thinkers who propose to lead the rest of us round by the nose. And if I had a master of that type, I might suggest his thinking not quite ripe. I'd look him in the eye and say quite plain, how do you think your soul might hide this stain? Does not the fear of heaven give you pause to contemplate the nature of its laws? Is it for you, you worm, you little freak? It's of this other master that I speak. Is it for you to jest where we revere, to interrupt our pieties with jeer? And just because you're set up as a peer, with noble ties and no professed career, with curly wig and plumage in your hat, with lace of gold draped over folds of fat, with ribbons of a flaming reddish hue. I talk of him, remember, not of you. Think you that sets you out as aught more able, that you might be so reckless and unstable to act the boor, unmannered and uncouth, where no one might confront you with the truth? Your servant must speak out with final breath, an evil life brings on an evil death. In spite of Sganarelle's ongoing remonstrations and his ironclad logic, Don Juan remains largely unmoved. In fact, he begins to envision his very licentiousness as the source of a greater grasp of power, prestige, and status. It is a strategy which may be summed up in a single word. Hypocrisy, you see, is all the fashion. And with a proper show of fervent passion, and not so much as may even exert you, I turn this vice into a stylish virtue. Pretending goodness is a lovely role, admirers will noisily extol the many virtues of the hypocrite. They never seem to get too sick of it. The hypocrite enjoys immunity and acts with sovereign impunity. It won't take long to form a holy tangle with party thugs aligned with this same angle. Denounce a single member of these bands, and you'll soon have them all upon your hands. But even those few faithful of the troops are simply acting as their leaders' dupes. They fall completely for the masquerade, admiring men who simply have portrayed the outside actions of the few sincere and act the ape to further their career. And in the midst of most prodigious scandal, a pious glance, a sign, a votive candle enshrouds in doubt the seamiest transgression. It's here I mean to make my next impression, not to forego my arsenal of joys, but to engage in them with lesser noise. And should someone discover an offense, the whole cabal will rush to my defense, for the defense of heaven is a stand from which I may explicitly command a hatred, a harassment, and attack, with others always covering my back. From this fell pulpit, I'll release my zealots to target these with insults, cries, and pellets. My army I'll effectively engage, and my assemblage shall be all the rage. Sir, it's no use. I can't control my tongue. You have descended to the lowest rung. There's something that I simply have to say. It is my obligation as valet. As that great author once said very wisely, I can't recall what his name was precisely. He said that in this world, man's like a bird. No, listen, for I simply must be heard. The bird sits on a bough that's on a tree. Whoever holds to that tree, you must agree, must follow principles as set in stone. And stone is stronger than fine words alone. Fine words are spoken well inside the court. And from the court, the courtiers export the fashion, which is subject to caprice, which of the soul is but the slightest piece. The soul is what gives life to breathe its breath, without the which the subject would be death, and death stirs thoughts of heaven in its dearth, fair heaven being far above the earth. The earth, we know, is clearly not the water. And on the water, storms cause ships to totter. These ships must have good pilots in their bow. Good pilots sail with prudence as their vow. And prudence is not in the young, but old, who love their riches, if the truth were told. The riches are what make people rich. And the rich are not the poor left in some ditch. The poor have needs, and needs know not of laws. And those who know no laws are beasts with claws, and therefore, ipso facto at the least, you will be damned to you?